Hi, and welcome to Lesson 1, Converting Decimals and Fractions, and using the power of 10. In this lesson, I will show you how to change decimals to fractions and fractions to decimals, all using the power of 10 and the place value system. Okay, here we go. I have a place value chart for you here, and it is also working with the powers of 10. It has your numbers in standard form and fractional form. So let's start over here with the power of 10 where it says 10 to the fourth power. That's basically 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. If we move over to the right to the standard form, that equals 10,000. All of these are equivalent because we can go to the fractional form and we can turn any whole number into a fraction by just putting it over 1. And then we have the place value, which is the 10,000ths. For the purpose of working with percents, we are going to work with everything behind or to the right of the decimal. So I'm going to go down here, and as you can see, we got the thousandths, the hundredths, the tens, the ones, and then we have the tenths place. If we move back over to the left of the table where we have 10 to the negative first power, this is where we first have our decimals. So basically, the tenths place, I have one digit behind the decimal, as it shows right here. That's equivalent to 1/10 as a fraction. If I move down to the next column, when I'm 10 to the negative second power, I've got 2 digits behind the decimal, and I'm equal to 1/100th, which puts me in the hundredths place. Hopefully you can see the pattern here. When I go to the next place value, I have 3 digits behind the decimal. I'm 1/1000th, and I'm in the thousandths place. Okay, now let's look at some examples of numbers behind the decimal. So right here I have a 0, a decimal, and a 2. Since the 2 falls in the tenths place and there's only that one digit behind the decimal, I would say this is 2/10ths. My next number has 2 digits behind the decimal. And if I needed to go back and look at my chart, when I have 2 digits behind the decimal, I am in the hundredths place. So since the 5 is in the hundredths place, I would say 45 hundredths. The next one has 3 digits behind the decimal. Going back to my chart, when I have 3 digits behind the decimal, I am in the thousandths place. And basically, when I say these numbers, I look at the last digit behind the decimal. In this case, it's going to be 6, and that's my place value. So that 6 is in the thousandths place, so I've got 756 thousandths. Now, what happens if you have a whole number? It works pretty much the same way. You have the 1 in front of the decimal, so that's just 1. And you would add and I look here, I have 2 digits behind the decimal. The 3 is in the hundredths place, so I would say 1 and 23 hundredths. So now we're going to convert decimals to fractions. So basically we're going to start by saying the decimal incorrect place value. So if I look right here, my 6 happens to be in what place? It's in the hundredths place. So I'm going to say this as 56 hundredths. So now, remember, my decimals and fractions kind of sounded the same. So I'm going to make this 56 over 100. Now, what do we always do with fractions? We always have to put them in simplest form. So my next step is going to find the greatest common factor, which is the GCF. In this case, it happens to be 4. And I'm going to divide the numerator and the denominator by the GCF. My numerator is my top number, right here, the 56, and my denominator is the bottom number, the 100. And I'm going to divide them both by 4, putting my fraction in simplest form, so I have 14 over 25, and it's called 14/25. The last thing we're going to do is convert fractions to decimals. The one thing I want you to remember is that a fraction bar means to divide. So if I have this fraction 14 over 25, it actually means 14 divided by 25. It's telling me to divide the numerator by the denominator. So if I was to write the numerical expression, I would write it as 14 divided by 25. Here's my division. I want you to notice that I put my numerator inside the house right here. So my 14's right here. And I put my denominator, which was the 25, on the outside of the house because I'm dividing by 25. If I go over here behind the 14, notice I put a decimal here. And the first thing I did was bring it straight up into my dividend, which is actually my answer. And it's going to be my decimal equivalent of my fraction. That's the main thing. And one of the very first things you need to remember is to put that decimal in the dividend or in your answer before you do any dividing. This will ensure that you have that decimal in the right place, along with putting all the numbers lined up in place value. So if you notice here, all my numbers are lined up perfectly in my division, especially with my answer here. So when I was dividing 25 into 14, it doesn't go in, so I put a 0 above that 4. So then I saw how many times 25 would go into 140. Well, it happens to go in 5 times, so I put that 5 above the 0 in the 140. And then I continued my division from there. I subtracted 125. I got 15. But since 25 can't go into 15 and I have no more numbers, I'm going to add a 0 and bring it down, which gives me 150 right here. Well, 25 can go into 150 6 times. Notice I kept it right above the 0 that I added, and then I get a 0 remainder. And that's how you divide fractions to decimals.